Good morning. So today we're going to start talking about four-term polynomials with factoring. But before we do that, I want us to go ahead and do these problems. This is what we did yesterday. So 2x squared minus x minus 28, 2x squared minus 3x minus a 9. Okay, so both of these are trinomials, and there are numbers in front of the x squareds that cannot be factored out. So what we're going to do is we're going to multiply that 2 times that 28. And we're going to factor the basic trinomial. So I'm going to have x squared minus an x minus 2 times 28, which is what, a 56? Okay, so now you're going to ask yourself what multiplies together to be a negative 56 and then adds together to be a negative 1. So what multiplies together to give you a negative 56 and adds together to be a negative 1? So negative 8 times a 7, negative 8 plus a 7 adds together to give you a negative 1. Okay, so this is going to factor to x minus 8 times x plus a 7. We're not done because we multiplied by 2 in the very beginning, so we now have to divide both of these by a 2. So 8 divided by that 2 is going to give you a 4. 7 can't be, that fraction can't be reduced, so we're going to bring that 2 up. So this is going to be 2x plus a 7. Okay. Always check it to make sure that you are correct. You should never miss a factoring problem because you can multiply it out to check your answers. Okay. All right, so what about this one, this next one? There is a 2 outside here that cannot be factored out. So we're going to multiply that 2 times that 9 there. So this is going to become x squared minus a 3x minus an 18. Okay. So now we're going to ask ourselves what multiplies together to be a negative 18. And then at the same time adds together to be a negative 3. So what is that? Negative 6 and 3. So negative 6 times 3, negative 6 plus a 3 adds together to be a negative 3. So this is going to factor to x minus 6 times x plus a 3. But we're not finished. We multiplied by that 2 in the very beginning, so we're going to divide by that 2 in the end here. So 6 divided by 2 can reduce, so this will be x minus a 3. This one needs to bring that 2 up. So this is going to be 2x plus a 3. Okay? Alright, so I hope you feel good about trinomials with a number in the front. So today we're going to talk about polynomials that have 4 terms. So when they have 4 terms, we do something called grouping. Okay, I'm going to do a problem while I kind of go through this with you. So my example here is going to be x cubed plus a 3x squared plus an 8x plus a 24. Okay. So the first thing you always ask yourself is there a greatest common factor? Factor out the GCF if you can. This one doesn't have a greatest common factor. So now I see how many terms I have. So I'm going to group the first 2 terms. and group second two terms. Okay, so what that means is that I'm actually going to put a parentheses around the first two terms, and I'm going to put a parentheses around the second two terms. When I do that, I am going to be able to factor a GCF inside each grouping. Okay, so in this first grouping, what can you factor out? What is the greatest common factor in this first grouping here? Okay, you got an x cubed and you have a 3x squared. So the greatest common factor in this grouping is going to be an x squared. So when you factor that out, you'll be left with x plus a 3. Okay, in the second grouping, what can you factor out? What is the greatest common factor there? And that is going to be an 8. So when you factor that out, you're going to be left with x plus a 3. So now, after you factor out the group, the greatest common factor in each group, the parentheses are going to be the same. So factor GCF so now you've got x plus 3 and x plus 3, and those are the same. So you're going to be able to put that on the outside, and what you're going to have left is what's on front of each one of those. So x squared plus an 8. There you go. And you can check your answer to see if you are correct. By multiplying it out. Okay. All right, let's do an example. All right, I'm not going to do that one right now. I'm going to save that one for in just a minute. So, sorry. All right, do this one for me. So 14x cubed minus a 7x squared plus 2xy minus a y. So I'll try this one for me. There are 4 terms. So we are going to group the first 2, group the second 2. Out of the first grouping, what can I factor out? I can take out a 7x squared. Okay, when I take out that 7x squared, what is going to be left inside that grouping? So 7 goes into 14 2 times, so you'll be left with a 2x there. Took a whole 7x squared out, so you'll be left with a 2x minus a 1. Okay, in the second grouping, what can you factor out? You can factor out a y. So when you factor that y out, you'll be left with 2x minus a 1. Okay, so now you have these 2 terms right here. And the greatest common factor in these 2 terms is going to be this 2x minus a 1. So you're going to factor that 2x minus a 1 out. So that means you're going to be left with what's inside. So 7x squared plus a y. Okay? So far so good? Okay, let's do another one. Okay, I'm going to let you do it, but be mindful of this minus right here. Okay, so there's no greatest common factor, so I'm going to group the first two and I'm going to group the second two. Okay, when there's a minus on the outside right here, it's going to change when you group what's inside. So when you do this, this is going to be 3x cubed minus an x squared minus, then this is going to be 3x minus a 1. So when there's a minus on the outside of the parentheses right here, it's going to change what's in parentheses. Okay? So the reason you put those groupings there, you just imaginally put those groupings. So if you got rid of those groupings, then this would be 3x cubed minus an x squared, and then you would have to distribute this negative, right? So this would be a negative 3x. A negative times a negative 1 turns into a positive 1. So that's the reason why you're having to change the signs, okay? You're not having to go back to that, but that's just the reason that you have to remember to change those signs. Okay. So now, in this first grouping, what can you factor out? You can factor out an x squared. So when you factor out an x squared, remember you're basically just dividing each term by x squared. So you'll be left with 3x minus a 1. And over here, there is no greatest common factor, so I'm just going to factor out that 1. So I'm going to have 3x minus a 1. So what's in parentheses? So 3x minus 1, those are the same. And you're going to be left with your x squared minus a 1. Okay. Well, this one, look at this one. This one can factor some more right here. That's a difference of 2 squares there. So this is going to be 3x minus a 1. And x squared minus a 1 is x minus 1 times x plus a 1. Okay, y'all do this one for me. Okay, so there is no greatest common factor for the problem. There are 4 terms, so I will be grouping. In the first grouping, what can you factor out? You can take out a 4 and, oops, I'm sorry. This should be an x cubed. I just messed your whole problem up. I'm sorry. So try it again. So take a few minutes and try to do that again. 4x cubed plus a 20x squared minus a 9x minus a 45. Okay, so greatest common factor here would be a 4x squared. So when I take out a 4x squared, I'm going to be left with an x plus a 5. Remember, if you multiply it back, 4x squared times x gives you 4x cubed. 4x squared times 5 gives you 20x squared. Okay? So over here, you're going to factor out between 9x and a 45, it's going to be a 9. Remember, there's a minus on the outside, so it's going to change that operation right there on the inside. So when you factor that 9, or it's a negative 9 out, you're going to have an x plus 9 goes into 45 5 times. Your parentheses are the same there, so this is you're going to factor out that x plus 5, and you're going to be left with what's on the outside of each one of those. Okay. So now I'm going to use my difference of squares right here and try to keep going with this one. 4x squared minus a 9, so that would factor to 2x minus 3 times a 2x plus a 3. We're going to start putting all of the factoring together. So I want you to just get comfortable with using all of it. Okay? So factoring by grouping. If you have any questions about anything, let me know. You have a great day.